Welcome to a New Mexico PBS Election 2020 special as we sit down with the candidates in the race for the United States Senate. Good evening. I'm New Mexico in Focus host Gene Grant. Joining me for the next hour are the three candidates vying to replace Tom Udall, who announced his retirement from the Senate last year. With me in studio is Republican candidate Mark Ronchetti. And with us via Zoom due to concerns about the recent spike in COVID cases is Democratic candidate Ben Ray Lujan and Libertarian candidate Bob Walsh. Welcome to you all. This year we're trying something a little different with our debate format. It's called a Citizens Agenda, and the idea is simple. Reach out to community partners and find out what issues they want candidates to talk about as they compete for your vote. This year we partnered with organizations representing two of the state's most underserved populations, the New Mexico Black Voters Collaborative and New Mexico Native Vote. Their members and supporters provided feedback that will inform the issues and questions that we'll tackle here tonight. We did publish that agenda, and you can read more on our election page at nmpbs.org. We want to be responsive and reflective, and that doesn't just end with that agenda. We encourage you to listen carefully over the next hour and fact check what these candidates have to say. We're committed to doing the same on our end. If you have lingering questions after the hour is over, we want to hear from you. Just reach out to the website and we'll do our best to get you answers in the coming days. We get into those issues. We want to give each candidate a chance to make some opening remarks directly to you, the voters. You each have a minute, and we'll begin with Representative Ben Ray Lujan.
Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'm Ben Ray Lujan, proud to be born and raised in New Mexico. I'm fourth generation on the small farm here in Nambe, where I learned from my mom, Carmen, who retired from the public school district, and my dad, who was a union iron worker, the importance and value of hard work and treating others with respect and dignity while working on those acequias. Look, all of you have been hit hard by COVID-19. And that's why I've been working every day to provide relief, to help us recover and rebuild. But we also have to increase access to affordable healthcare, make investments with infrastructure. And that's why I've been proud to be able to deliver on important initiatives like the Navajo-Gallup Water Pipeline, to get water to 43 chapters in the Navajo Nation. We all have to come together and work together, and these are tough times. It'd be an honor to earn your vote tonight, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate that. Up next, Republican candidate Mark Ronchetti.
Gene, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank PBS as well. Appreciates the venue here, and of course my fellow candidates as well. I'd like to thank them. You know, when my wife Christy and I got involved in this campaign, we thought about one key thing, and I think it's what a lot of you think about too, and that's your families, especially in this time of COVID. We think about Ava and Ella in our particular case, and we want them to grow up in a country that we grew up in, a country where they could chase their dreams, and the only limitation was how hard they're willing to work for it. But the fact of the matter is, in New Mexico now, the same problems keep plaguing us, and they're not getting any better. We don't educate our kids well enough. We don't provide safe streets, and we don't have enough job opportunities. We can change these things, and they can get better, but not if we continue to send the same people back to Washington who haven't solved the problem in the first place. So what I would ask you is, if it's time for a change, would you look at that change now? Look at the change to begin to chart a new path forward, because the same old path, the same old partisanship isn't getting us anywhere.
Appreciate that. Mr. Walsh, it's your chance now to talk directly to the voters. You have 1 minute.
Thank you for inviting me today. I hope you will enjoy what I must say. My diverse family loves New Mexico, but in your service to DC, I'll go, where every day my staff and I will duel the tyranny of single-party rule. We'll sponsor bills that everyone can bless. So on behalf of you, the IRS prepares a temporary tax return, which you may file or modify or burn. And immigration judges will set free, no longer getting paid by ICE. Indigenous and immigration lives give vigor and enchantment. Business thrives. To separate a family is a crime. And now I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. We appreciate that. Let's get right to questions. The participants in our Citizens Agenda are very concerned about the COVID-19 pandemic. With that in mind, they want to know if you believe that COVID is a legitimate threat to the health and safety of New Mexicans, or if you feel it's under control. And however you come down on this, what specific data are you relying on for your answer? We'll start with Representative Lujan.
Gene, this is an important question. Everyone that's tuning in tonight, everyone across New Mexico and across America has been hit hard by COVID-19. We need to listen to the doctors, to the scientists, and to the public health experts. The estimates today from the CDC are that over 219,000 people have lost their lives across America, nearly 1,000 in New Mexico alone. It's just wrong. And that's why there needs to be a national response to be able to stomp out COVID-19. President Trump has failed from the very beginning. And we now know, because of tapes that were released from a conversation that he had, that he knew how bad this was back in January. And he continued to spread misinformation. He tried telling the American people that it would be gone after Easter. He said that the warm weather would take care of it. And he spread misinformation like it was let out from a lab. We need to make sure we listen to the scientists, the doctors, and the public health experts. It's out of control, and it's a serious threat, and it's taken too many lives already.
Appreciate that. Mr. Walsh, your response, is this a legitimate concern? If not, why?
This is a legitimate concern, which of course is why I'm home and not in your studio. But we do not grant our health to Fed control. For years, their drug restraints have taken toll of lives and money needlessly. This year, their bungling justified our founders' fear. The 10th Amendment says that we reserve the right to choose the health care we deserve. Free markets work to keep our costs in hand and broaden choices for insurance plans. Let's bring back loving health care for our dime. And now I yield the balance of my time.
Mr. Ronchetti.
No question, Gene, this is very serious. I mean, there are more than 200,000 people dead in this country. Each day now in New Mexico, we're setting new records day over day for new infections. So there's no question this is a huge problem here, and we need to do a few things. First of all, we need to follow the science. I think we can all agree on that. We need to mask up and social distance, but we also have to begin to target some help to people who so badly need it in this state, whether it be our small businesses, which are struggling, whether it be employees who are just trying to make a paycheck week over week because of this pandemic. And I think the key in all of this is we need another bill to come out of Congress and start to help the people of this state. But unfortunately, it's been politicized. And right now, Nancy Pelosi is sitting on a bill in the House and the Senate, and both sides are in this standoff. And it's got to stop. The congressman has a real role here and can really help get this done. So we've got to stop the finger pointing. We've got to get some aid to the people who badly need it. Now, I realize in the House they passed a bill, but that bill had a lot to do with a lot of other things and not COVID. Things like releasing violent criminals out of jail early and also giving tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires on the coast. Let's cut that out. Let's just give people what they need to get things going.
I've got a follow-up for all three. I'll start with you, Mr. Ronchetti. Do you think we need another COVID relief package in Congress? Why or why not? But what should this package focus on, and was there enough oversight for the first CARES Act?
Look, I give a lot of grace to what happened with the first CARES Act, to everybody involved, because everyone had to react very, very quickly in this on both sides. So I think both sides operated the best they could in the moment on the CARES Act. Obviously, there's been some fraud with the CARES Act. That should be pursued to the fullest extent of the law, but I don't put that on any of our leaders at all. But we do need another bill here, and I think it should include a couple of things. Number one, liability protection for businesses who are doing it the right way. If you're masking up and social distancing, you shouldn't have to worry about a frivolous lawsuit. Targeted aid to things like our hospitality and even our tourism industry here, that needs it as well. So some of these groups that didn't get any help definitely need the help as well. And we need to make sure even people that are still struggling to make those payments get some help too, Gene, because I think what we're looking at here is this continues to go on and on. That's why it's so important that we get a bipartisan bill out. And the fact that we've waited 3 months for that and there is no bill is unconscionable. And I would ask the congressman, why hasn't it happened?
Let me ask the congressman that very question. Do you think we need another COVID relief package bill in Congress? But what should it look like, Representative?
Gene, I'm going to get to your question, but there's a few things that Mr. Ronchetti said that are important to point out. Number one, when Mark was asked during the debate on May 19, 2020, KSVP, if New Mexico should get more money and, in his words, bailed out, his answer was no. Pete Domenici and Manuel Lujan fought for every dollar for the state of New Mexico, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. And also, Mark said we should follow the science. I agree with that. But Mark also said, and he went to Twitter just like President Trump and said, the state of New Mexico should open up just like Texas and Arizona, while he continues to ignore wearing masks and has big events throughout the state. We need to make sure we're standing up to that nonsense. Look, there needs to be another round of relief for the American people. Direct payments of $1,200, small payments like loans and grants that are going to help our businesses in New Mexico with small and large grants and loans as well. Support for our local hospitals, money to help our schools safely reopen. And that includes relief for the state of New Mexico cities and counties. Did you know that police departments, 86% of the funding for police departments comes from local governments? That money is going to be needed for the public health response.
1 minute, Mr. Lujan.
As well as helping our fire departments.
Appreciate that. Mr. Walsh, same question. Should there be another COVID relief bill, and what should be in it or not in it, in your view?
No, there should not be another COVID relief bill. This is a major impact on our economy. We're not going back to where we were. We may not see indoor theaters reopen for many years. This is not a flash in the pan. This plague is going to be with us for 2 to 5 years at least. And we are learning to adjust to it. We're learning to work from home. We're learning to not travel. Businesses that relied on crowds getting together are not going to make it through this. And it makes no sense to try to restore the status quo when we've got to pay permanent change. And all that the relief package is trying to do is to make things back the way they were. We all have to adapt to this new reality and take initiative and innovation and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Our community partners, did you have something, Mr. Ronchetti?
Well, no, I just didn't hear an answer from Congressman Lujan. He
Let me
is
give you-
the
let me
assistant speaker
keep
of
it
the
to 15
House.
seconds, if you would.
Just a quick, he's the assistant speaker of the House. He can provide the aid that everybody needs. So instead of the misdirection about talking about things and mischaracterizing what I said, Congressman, you're right there with Nancy Pelosi. You can get her on the phone right now and get a deal done and help people in New Mexico. That's all I'm curious about. Can't we do that?
Mr. Lujan, do you have a rebuttal?
To that. Look, Mark Ronchetti in his own Twitter feed said this is another seat for Donald Trump. This is not a seat for Donald Trump, Mark. The U.S. Senate seat in New Mexico is for New Mexicans, #1. You'd also be a rubber stamp for Mr. Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell this week said he was not going to do this. Mitch McConnell has been absent from the negotiations. The leader of the Senate, Mark, it's an absolute disgrace to the American people. We need the Senate to take up this COVID relief package rather than trying to push through that confirmation that they are. And you know that.
Time, Mr. Lujan. Appreciate that. Our community partners are also interested in where you all are standing on the Affordable Care Act. The Trump administration is clear they want to dismantle it as it currently is constituted. Do you agree with the administration, Mr. Ronchetti? Why or why not?
I think what we need to do is we need to replace the Affordable Care Act. Let me be very clear on this. I'm on the Affordable Care Act. My daughter Ava's on the Affordable Care Act, and she has a pre-existing condition. Those pre-existing conditions are not covered under the Affordable Care Act. So what I would tell you is it's not good enough. If I were to ask you at home, have your premiums gone down? Have your copays gone down since the Affordable Care Act? The answer is no. Everything is getting more and more expensive, and your coverage gets worse and worse. To be honest with you, most of us now just have catastrophic care. So we have to improve on it. And here's what I think it's going to take. It's going to take a bipartisan group of lawmakers to do it. Because if we have a partisan bill shoved through, it's too easy in Washington for everyone to demonize it. And I don't want to see that happen. So what should we do here? Number one, we've got to protect pre-existing conditions in Medicare and Medicaid. But then we also have to provide plans that fit the people who want those plans that are tailored to them, that can cross state lines to get them, no more surprise billing, and lower prescription drug costs. These things can all be done. But my opponent and I have a very clear difference here. He wants a complete government takeover of your health care. That would mean no more private plans. That would mean 2 to 3 times taxes going up on you and no more choice. So there's a very big difference there.
Representative Lujan, as it's currently constituted, should it be dismantled and restart again, or if it has to be tweaked, what is your answer?
My opponent, Mr. Ronchetti, has been singing from the mountaintops the same Republican talking points about repealing the Affordable Care Act from the very beginning of his campaign. It's dangerous. If the Affordable Care Act is repealed, here are the facts. Those protections for people with pre-existing conditions like cancer and diabetes go away. It's why this rush through the Supreme Court nomination concerns me and concerns so many people across America. They are working to repeal it. And when Republicans were in the House and Senate working to repeal the Affordable Care Act, here's the plan that Mark Ronchetti would have voted for, which was the Republican plan. It was said to raise premiums on most Americans. It actually would have slapped the age tax. If you're 55 or older, what would have happened? You would have been hit with an age tax. And it would not have protected people with pre-existing conditions. One of the areas that needs to be fixed is surprise billing. I actually am working on a bill that we're going to do that and we'll pass it. Lowering drug costs. We already passed that to Mitch McConnell and he refuses to take it up. And then ending these junk plans, these short-term plans that don't protect people with pre-existing conditions that have gone worse under Donald Trump.
And
I think that too many New Mexicans are being convinced that they should buy those short-term plans.
Bob Walsh, is it time to dismantle ACA or tweak it? What's your view on it?
This is not only bad policy, it's unconstitutional. The Constitution specifically restricts Congress from acting on powers that are not granted in the Constitution. Healthcare has traditionally been a state responsibility. Insurance is a state responsibility. There's no reason that these strictly local problems should be dealt with by a massive federal government bureaucracy.
Moving to education, did you have a rebuttal?
Well, it's just that I have to give the congressman credit. He actually made up a theoretical position for me on a bill that I wasn't even in Congress to vote on, which I have to give him credit. That's a pretty smooth move. But I will say this, Congressman, I think we have to replace, not repeal. And replace is critical because it's going to require both sides working together here. But the problem is, Congressman, too often you side with D.C. over New Mexico. And that's what ends up hurting people here. Because if your plan goes through, rural health care is going to be gutted because more and more doctors are going to be pushed out of the system here with lower reimbursement rates. This won't work here, Congressman, and I think everybody knows that. Even Joe Biden says he wants nothing to do with Medicare for all.
Representative, your rebuttal, 30 seconds.
Gene, New Mexico had the highest uninsured rate in America before the passage of the Affordable Care Act that Mark Ronchetti wants to repeal. Mark Ronchetti said Medicare and Medicaid should be private insurance plans. Seniors, I hope you're listening to that. Mark, I'm New Mexican through and through, born and raised here. It runs through my blood. This is where I'm going to be buried to rest. I'm fighting for the good of the people of New Mexico. And look, if you're saying you don't support the Republican plan, which is the repeal and replace plan that you've been screaming from the mountaintops, that's news today. But the facts are the Republican repeal plan would have increased premiums on the American people, 55 and older.
30 seconds, Representative.
And you would have not had protections for people with pre-existing conditions.
Moving to education now, which was another top priority of our citizens' agenda, respondents. COVID-19 has definitely impacted the education system in this state as well. In hybrid virtual learning, requirements have disproportionately affected poor and rural students, as we all know. How do we improve broadband internet access, especially in our poor and rural communities, starting with Bob Walsh?
All federal force derives from our consent. Protection of our rights is what is meant. For social goals, we work as volunteers. Those well-meant isms always lead to tears. Why send our cash to DC middlemen who keep a share and send some back again, restricting schools, construction, and our health? Their paperwork and rules consume our wealth. Seacoast standards may not suit our climb. And now I yield the balance of my time.
Mr. Representative Lujan, same question. This has been bedeviling New Mexico for a long time, since long before you were elected to office. How do we get this broadband issue solved in New Mexico?
Gene, look, everyone tuning in knows the difference between fast internet, slow internet, and no internet. And here in the United States of America, we have to change that. We need to make sure we're increasing access to high-speed internet and making it affordable in every community. The last time that there was a significant investment in trying to close the broadband gap came out of the American Recovery Reinvestment Act in 2009. Recently, I was proud to be one of the champions and authors of an infrastructure package that is sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk that included over $80 billion to be able to close the digital divide in rural and tribal communities. We need to make sure we drive that investment, but we also have to have accountability with it, Gene. And that's why I've also passed legislation on a bipartisan basis to be able to map where these holes exist so that way we can drive those investments there. During COVID, I've also been pushing the FCC where we've been able to get some expanded connectivity on the Navajo Nation using spectrum that wasn't used. There needs to be a direct investment here with satellite technology, with using a laser to move data, to be able to take fiber to the curb, light up dark fiber in New Mexico. But it's going to start with that federal investment to be able to drive that home.
Mr. Ronchetti, where does the private side fit into this? Is it all a government issue here? How does this work for you?
No, I think it's both. There's no question about it. But there is definitely a government issue here in the respect that we need a new infrastructure bill. There's no doubt about that. The infrastructure bill has not gone along like it should. Now, there was some talk early on over the past couple of years that we would finally get an infrastructure bill. But yet again, politics wins out. There's a standoff, and you heard it right there. The congressman decries partisanship with more partisanship. And so that's exactly what we don't need. And we do have a lot of our rural communities that badly need this connectivity, not only for schooling, but for healthcare. Telemedicine is going to be critical in all of this. And if we're going to expand our telemedicine network, we have to have the ability to have broadband to do it. Now, there's a lot of emerging technology here in New Mexico, which is going to help with this. There's no question. Up in the spaceports are doing things to help. There's a lot of different avenues we're going to be able to tackle with this, but this will likely take agreement again coming out of the Congress. And I would hope that going forward here, we would get an infrastructure bill going that could begin to fund this.
Gene, if I could just respond quickly there.
Please, 30 seconds.
Mark, I passed that bill out of the House of Representatives, the infrastructure bill that you're talking about. And now I'm asking all the people tuning in today, all the voters of New Mexico, empower me to be your U.S. Senator, and I'll go to the Senate and I'll pass that bill and we'll invest in New Mexico.
Mr. Walsh.
We do desperately need broadband in our rural and in our indigenous communities. But don't wait for the government to provide it. You've got to get in there and get it for yourself. You need it desperately. You need it mostly because your young people with access to the internet will create new businesses that can operate in your areas.
Mr. Ronchetti?
Congressman, I get what you've passed out of the House, but this is the same story with you each time. This is you siding with D.C. over New Mexico. You go into D.C., you climb up to be Nancy Pelosi's assistant speaker, which is an accomplishment. There's no question about that. But it's not an accomplishment if nothing ever gets passed into law to help New Mexicans. And that's the real issue here. It's effectiveness. And Congressman, right now, there's a million of these bills. You talk about the HEROES Act all the time. Again, a bill I don't support and most other people don't support, but it's dead on arrival. You have to be able to work with the Senate. And right now, you haven't shown the ability to be able to do that.
Lujan, do you have a response?
That infrastructure package, maybe you don't support that infrastructure package, Mark. You should say that here to be plain and clear. That infrastructure package takes New Mexico into consideration, closes the broadband gap, invests in water and wastewater and infrastructure. It even drives investments where we can compete for that Space Force right here at home. It improves our schools. It makes a difference in every one of our communities, and it's going to put people to work. I'm proud of that package. Heck, this is even an area where President Trump agrees with us. He said, deliver an infrastructure package. We as House Democrats, we delivered an infrastructure package. What's the problem? Mitch McConnell. And you want to go be another vote for Mitch McConnell. That's the problem. But the good news is, voters in New Mexico, you have a choice. You can either send Mark to be another vote for Mr. Mitch McConnell, or you can send someone that can deliver on these infrastructure package like I did in the House, and we'll pass it in the Senate.
Just quickly, Congressman, I think just a quick thing, Congressman. You know, I'll tell you this much. I've never met Mitch McConnell. I've never spoken to Mitch McConnell. But you, sir, are the Assistant Speaker of the House, and you keep pointing fingers. When you look at Nancy Pelosi and you look at Chuck Schumer, these people are your colleagues, and nothing is getting done.
Hi, Mr. Ronchetti. Moving on, by many measures, hold on, Mr.
You attacked me there.
Right, 15 seconds, please. Go ahead.
And Manuel Lujan were honored to earn the support of their colleagues to be in these chair positions and leadership roles, and it empowered them to be a stronger voice for the people of New Mexico. That's who I've modeled after, Mark. And you may not like Pete or Manuel, but I sure respect them.
Appreciate you getting that in. Now, by many measures, wages and salaries for the middle class has remained stagnant for decades. That means, in effect, the middle class is disappearing. The gap between the haves and haves not is not just growing, it's becoming a feature of the American economy. What would you do in Congress to increase the wages of working people in New Mexico? Mr. Ronchetti.
You have to make doing business easier, first and foremost here. And that means you need to lower taxes on people, especially in a time of COVID, where you say, we're not going to continue to put this huge burden on you and your family when you're struggling just to get things going again. And we have to do a few other things as well. We've got to cut some of the red tape so the businesses can start rolling again as well. Again, they're going to have to do it safely in a COVID world. There's no easy way to say that. But there's no question that there are opportunities there. But more jobs are the way to push up wages here. And there's no doubt that we can do that as we head through the next 6 months to a year. We have a real opportunity to grow the economy once again in this state. But I think it's going to take another part of this, and that's reforming the way we educate our kids. Remember, we're 50th in K through 12 education, and too often those kids either graduate high school or leave high school with no job prospects here. We need to expand our higher ed so that we can put schools all across the state to learn trades. And if kids don't want to go to college, they can learn a trade, and they can learn all of these things. These things are critical. But again, Congressman Lujan wants to raise taxes. He wants to come in here and add regulation. That will kill the economy. And in fact, as you look at the numbers right now, if we go with tax increases at any point in our economy right now, it's going to kill jobs.
Representative, the World Economic Forum says that accounting for inflation, hourly wages in 2019 were effectively the same as they were in the 1970s. What is Congress's job here when it comes to wages and things that, that go into people's pocket?
Well, Gene, in order to create opportunities here at home, there's some important work that I'm proud that we've been doing. The USMCA, which improved as we moved it through the House, that's going to be more manufacturing jobs here in New Mexico, more opportunities in the ag community, as well as we work to create opportunities in every corner of our state. We also need to make sure we're investing in education. The state of New Mexico needs to immediately tap into the Land Grant Permanent Fund and make investments here at home. At the federal level, Title I and IDEA needs to be fully funded to make that happen. I'm also proud that I passed legislation to make investments with our community colleges through the Department of Energy for workforce training. So that way we have more plumbers and pipe fitters and welders and electricians and iron workers, just like my dad, and we're able to fuel that pipeline. And then lastly, fully expand the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit. It's estimated that that will lift as many as 30% of families that are currently facing poverty in New Mexico out of poverty. I'm excited about New Mexico's future and building these economic opportunities and raising wages and making home ownership more of a reality for more folks, Gene.
Mr. Walsh, there's a question here when it comes to wages and such. Is this the job of business or is this the job of government to solve this problem? Why or why not?
Well, mostly it's the job of government to get out of the way. Representative Lujan touts all these things that he's done that exceed the powers given to Congress in the Constitution, in spite of the fact that he swore to defend the Constitution. What we care about is what we can buy with our take-home pay. And as you point out, that has not been increasing. We spend all this money on these nice sounding things, and then the money gets borrowed. In fact, the Federal Reserve right now is buying all the US bonds, or most of them, by just creating money in their computers. In fact, they have a goal of inflation of 2 or 3%, so that when we increase teachers' pay by 1%, it's not much of a good deal.
Well, I'm going to move on from that one. I had another follow-up, but we'll just press on. Our Citizens Agenda partners care deeply about climate change, as you might imagine, and want immediate action. We know that the science community is clear on the dangers, but the U.S. Department of Defense has also long identified climate change as a major security risk that can aggravate problems such as poverty and social tensions, as well as political stability, especially. They cited it in their own report in 2010, 2016, and 2018, and 2020. Why haven't we done more as a country to aggressively address human-caused climate change? Representative Lujan, I'll start with you.
Gene, I appreciate the framing of this question because it's important to acknowledge that both under President Barack Obama and under President Trump, their Department of Defense said that climate crisis is an existential threat to our national security and will cause harm to soldiers. The United States needs to take a serious step forward in becoming back part of the Paris Climate Accords and moving legislation that's going to reduce emissions and pollution. And look, this happened under President Reagan. It happened under President Bush when they moved to leaded fuel and they moved to reduce NOx and SOx. And the utility companies and industry at that time said the same thing then that they say today, that they can't do it. And as a matter of fact, the economy got better. We created more job opportunities, and we're able to protect our air and water and our way of life as well. It's important to move forward, Gene. We need to have a leader at the very top that doesn't deny that climate change is real. And I think that's why we also need a change with who's going to be the president of the United States of America to set that tone so we can all continue to push forward and move policy, work with allies around the world, and work with friends at home. Look, Gene, I was raised by my grandfather, Celedon, to leave the land better than I found it.
1 minute.
If we all took that approach, we'd be better off, sir.
Mr. Walsh, same question. Why haven't we done more as a country to aggressively address human-caused climate change?
Climate change is real. We will always have climate change. Started out when the plants put all that poisonous oxygen into the atmosphere, which caused the pestilence of animals and humans to appear on the planet. There is such a thing as climate science. Climate predictions are not climate science. They require inputs of guesses about where the economy will go in the future, guesses about what innovations and inventions will occur. Only then are these things input into something that looks like a climate model that is very crude approximation for very complex processes. The result that comes out is some grand number like average global temperature. But nobody is willing to say, what is the average global temperature we would like to have? Is it colder than it is now? How about a new ice age? In fact, civilization has advanced most rapidly when the climate has been warmer.
Time, sir. Mr. Ronchetti, when you think about it, poverty, social tensions, political stability, these are serious issues when you talk about human-caused climate change. What's the answer as a senator?
Well, first of all, I do think climate change is real. I've studied the atmosphere my entire adult career, so there's no question about that. We have to address it. The question, Gene, is which way do we address it? And I believe we address it through innovation. So what does that mean? Well, it means carbon capture. It means geothermal. It means small modular nuclear reactors will be a possibility. If you look at our oil and gas industry now, we have never produced oil and gas more cleanly and efficiently than we do now. We need to continue that progress as well. All of these things we can push forward on, and we have been pushing emissions down, but we need to continue to do that. But I don't think we can afford to destroy our economy to do it. And that's where you get into the other side of this, and that's regulation. And that's what the congressman wants to do with the Green New Deal. He wants to get rid of oil and gas in 10 years. That will cost $93 trillion, 130,000 jobs in New Mexico, and it will also gut our funding for education. It's an irresponsible position. We absolutely can't do it. So we can address climate change, but it can't be with this. And I hope the congressman today will stand up and say, I am done with the Green New Deal. Because again, even Joe Biden said, I want nothing to do with the Green New Deal. Congressman, we can get away from this thing, can't we?
Representative, your response?
Mark, I've shared this with you a few times. The Green New Deal is a non-binding resolution. It's only 13 pages, and you should take the time to read it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to take this opportunity here to put up another one of your attacks here, Mark. You said that also includes text that's not in there. Factcheck.org, Washington Post, Business Insider. You've built your entire campaign off of this slide. So let's be honest with people across New Mexico about our policies. Let's advocate for our own positions. Let's tell the American people and the voters in New Mexico what we stand for, instead of your campaign that's been built on this lie. I invite everyone to go to factcheck.org. Take a read yourself.
We're allowed to bring signs into this? I had no idea, Congressman. I would have brought signs too. But
Mark,
you're more than welcome.
Gene,
Again, Congressman.
Gene, hold on. Mark, your campaign,
by all means, Congressman.
Bringing notes in. And so PBS called us all up and said, Mark Ronchetti's campaign said everyone can bring stuff in. So
Yes.
that's
Congressman, absolutely, because again, for the second debate in a row, you won't show up. So there's nothing I can do, Congressman. You want to do it from your house? That's great. That's all on you. But let's leave that for where it is. I'm here. I was at KOB too. Let's let that go. So let's talk about exactly what we're dealing with here. Now, could I just actually respond now because he jumped? I just want to respond
15 seconds
to this. Okay, Congressman, really, you said it's a non-binding resolution. Are you going to tell people across southeastern New Mexico, who are the single biggest contributors to our financial, really welfare here in New Mexico, that you're just supporting non-binding resolutions to destroy their industry? That is ridiculous. If you have time for non-binding resolutions, Congressman, then you've got too much time. How about we pass laws that help people?
Representative, please.
Gene, but we're not in the studio because of COVID. We saw the highest numbers spread across New Mexico. Mark, understand the science, man.
Congressman, that's ridiculous. That's not science-based.
Mark,
Gene and
well, let me hold
science-based.
Let me hold all you guys up here a quick second.
Is wrong, Mark?
We have all agreed that it's not a down on you, Representative, that you're choosing to be safe at a distance. We can get what we need to get done here. It's really not an issue. And I'll also remind the folks at home, please do go ahead and keep fact-checking as you're hearing things go along here. We're doing the same. Now, we've got individual questions for individual candidates. I'm going to start with Mr. Ronchetti. Mark, this is just for you. You've been a news reporter and worked in TV news for more than 2 decades. What is fake news exactly, and have you ever seen it?
Absolutely. I think there is fake news. There's no question about it. And I think too often it can come from both sides. Fake news to me is when you take a political agenda and use that as the underpinning for your story. So you actually come up with the conclusion before you start the story. And that to me is what's most concerning, because I think more and more people don't know what to believe when they watch things now. And I'll tell you that.
Were you ever pressured by a producer or anybody to do fake news?
Well, I was a meteorologist, so I was, but never. And I will say this too, by the way, just something we can all agree on. The news here, and I'll wrap KNME into this, the national news and the local news are 2 different groups. I really think the local news stations here across this state really do a good job, and they really try hard. So I'm not talking about that. But I am saying that people, I think, are losing faith in institutions. I really do. I believe they're losing faith. And part of the reason why is we have political leaders who come here and say one thing, like the congressman, and then they vote another way in D.C. And that's the problem. People don't believe anything anymore. I'll tell you this much. If I'm fortunate enough to be your U.S. Senator, what I say here will be how I vote in Washington.
Next question for Representative Lujan. You have served in the U.S. House of Representatives for more than a decade now. In that time, you've taken on several high-profile leadership positions and are currently the Assistant Speaker, that, as we heard from Mr. Ronchetti earlier. It's a pretty impressive position, but how has it or your time heading up the DCCC benefited the 3rd Congressional District that you represent?
Gene, as I said earlier, when we saw the work of Senator Domenici, of Manuel Lujan, the late former U.S. Senator Dennis Chavez, Senator Bingaman, and other incredible leaders that have served us, like Senator Udall, at the federal level, they've been encouraged and supported by their colleagues to serve in these important roles. And I follow that model. It allows for you to be at that leadership table to drive New Mexico's voices even louder and to be able to work to make a difference for them. And the way that I've been able to help the farmers up in northern New Mexico who are being discriminated against by the USDA under Donald Trump, by the FSA, and we continue to keep pushing until we got some positive relief. The work's not done yet, but we finally got some positive resolutions. I did that by working with my colleagues and gaining more support for an issue very specific to New Mexico, one county in our beautiful state, Gene. That's how you can make a difference. And look, I was very concerned when President Trump had unchecked power. We saw him running rampant. There was no check on him. The American people wanted legislation to lower prescription drug prices for them, invest in infrastructure, make sure that we were able to pass sweeping government reform legislation to overturn Citizens United.
Time, Representative.
And by winning back the majority in the House, we were able to do that. It was all through the lens of New Mexico.
Bob Walsh, question for you. I'm curious about this. Practically speaking, how would a libertarian function in the U.S. Senate, which is heavily reliant on party seniority for key committee appointments? Who would you caucus with, and how would you approach consensus building and not be relegated to being ostracized by the Democrats and Republicans both?
Well, I would certainly be the leader of my party in the Senate. And We expect that the Senate is going to be almost evenly divided. Last numbers I saw were 46 Republicans, 46 Democrats, and 8 that haven't been settled yet. And I would stand as a bulwark against extreme positions on either side. There are a few, 2 or 3 moderate Republicans and 2 or 3 moderate Democrats. And as we would stand together as a center that would prevent things from going too far in one direction or another. The great things that we Americans fear is that there will be one party controlling both branches of the Congress and the White House. In fact, on off years, we vote against the party that controls the White House in order to avoid the tyranny of one party rule. And as being the person in the center of the Senate, I could help with that.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Moving to education, the elections now. One of our Citizens Agenda respondents wants to know, quote, how do you plan to ensure that every New Mexican, regardless of skin color, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status, has equal access to vote between now and November 3rd, 2020? Representative Lujan, start with you.
Gene, this is an important issue. Voting is a fundamental right in America, and there should be efforts to protect everyone's access to the ballot box. My late colleague, Congressman John Lewis, who we have a bill named after him now, to restore the Voting Rights Act. I don't know if Mark Ronchetti supports restoring the Voting Rights Act. He's been silent on the issue. I've also authored the Native American Voting Rights Act. We've continued to see this administration prey on early voting. He took his Postmaster General to make it impossible for those ballots to move, but they got caught. And because the American people demanded that they stop, we were able to reverse that. Look, I want to make sure that we encourage everyone to vote. It's your fundamental right. No matter which of us you're supporting, please have a plan to vote. You can vote by mail still. You can vote early in person. Make sure you wear your mask. You have your hand sanitizer. You practice social distancing. But please get out and vote. We have to make sure we're protecting that right. And that's something I've been working on at the federal level. Again, we passed that bill in different forms. It's all sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk. He refuses to pass restoration of the Voting Rights Act. And that's not partisan, Mark. That's the reality. Those are the facts. And that's why we need leaders that believe in voting rights, and we're going to fight to protect them.
Time. Mr. Ronchetti?
Well, I think we can agree on the fact that we need everybody we can to vote. Absolutely. And I think what is so disappointing in this is to see how even the post office has become partisan, and it isn't on one side. It's on both sides. The post office fights over this back and forth serves to erode the confidence of the American people in our voting. And you want to know the truth. The truth is that the post office will deliver what we need it to deliver. I have every confidence that the Secretary of State will do that as well. We have a variety of ways you can vote. You can vote absentee, obviously. You can vote day of. You can vote early. And I hope everybody gets out there and does it. And you do need to be very, very careful. But there is one issue in your vote that's actually very, very important. And that's the Electoral College, because we are part of the Electoral College. And my opponent wants to get rid of it. And what does that mean? It means that New Mexico has a bigger voice when we have the Electoral College. If we go by just a straight vote across the country, we are not going to have a voice. What the Electoral College allows for is an extra voice for New Mexico and gives us more authority in these elections. Don't let that go. And Congressman, please don't let this go. Don't let the Electoral College go. It will hurt New Mexico.
Bob Walsh, your thoughts on this?
Well, if you're listening to what the other 2 candidates said, neither one of them will take any actions between now and Election Day to help improve access to the voting. And neither will I. It's a ridiculous question. None of us has any power to do that. Only the Secretary of State and the county clerks can do anything at this point. I was a plaintiff in a lawsuit called Lepeticky and all that led to having paper ballots in New Mexico. With paper ballots, we have the ability to recount and we have the ability to audit. So I have actually done something about that.
I have a follow-up. I'll start with Mr. Ronchetti since you brought it up, and Mr. Lujan, I'd like you to weigh right in afterwards as well. As U.S. Senator, you brought up the post office, and you say there's problems on both sides, that folks are gaming the system, so to speak. As U.S. Senator, what would you do to protect the U.S. Post Office from being politicized?
Well, it's a fair point because I think it isn't on one side, but I think what you have to do is forge a better way forward. There's such a poisonous atmosphere in Washington that when each side just starts screaming about the post office, everybody goes, where should I vote? What do I do? Who do I trust? And I can't blame them for that. And so that's what concerns me the most. So I think the first thing you have to do is make sure the post office is properly funded and they can do everything they need to do. There's no question about that. And the head of the post office has said that is the case. But going forward, the post office has had funding problems for decades here. So we do need to address that because in some ways we have very much a changing society as far as what we mail and what we don't. But I think this is poisonous. And I think when you talk about, there's just nothing in D.C. that can't be politicized. And unfortunately, the congressman chooses D.C. fights over solving problems in New Mexico.
Representative, we have good indications from press reports that, in fact, folks from the administration were working with some higher-ups at the post office to, in fact, have some games played with mail-in voting. As a U.S. Senator, I have to ask again, what can any one U.S. Senator do to solve these problems and not have the post office become an arm of either political party?
Well, Gene, one thing I'll say is that I'm encouraged by all of the early voting in New Mexico. Please keep voting. Number two, I hope I heard Mark incorrectly a little bit earlier with asking or answering his question about the post office. He seemed to allude that the post office was trying to work to erode faith in the post office. That is not the case. That is absolutely not the case. President Trump and his Postmaster General have been working to erode faith in the Postal Service. It was all of us coming, and I hope I'm wrong, Mark. I see your response there. So if you're wrong, that's good. I stand corrected there. But look, this is going to be critically important. When President Trump is trying to take the faith out of the Postal Service and telling people that they shouldn't vote by mail, that's voter intimidation. I mean, I don't know what else to call it, Gene. But what you can do in the Senate is under Republican rule, they required a 70-year pre-funding of the Postal Service. No other private sector entity and no other federal agency is required to do that.
Time, sir.
That legislation has been drafted, it's been passed, it needs to be adopted and signed into law.
Just so you know, Congress, I didn't say that. I appreciate it.
New subject. Racial inequality and police reform are also on the minds of our community partners, the New Mexico Black Voters Collaborative and New Mexico Native Vote. Here's the question: has America's system of policing and justice evolved to a place of inherent bias against people of color? And to what degree can police and criminal justice reform change that? I'll start with Representative Lujan.
Look, this is a very important question, Gene, that we're having all over America and all over New Mexico. Number one, I think that when we take a step back, Gene, we have to all acknowledge that racism is a problem in America. It's real. Systemic racism in every facet. When you look at health disparities, environmental injustice, and also when we talk about reforms that need to be adopted to protect people's civil rights. Look, I think that there's agreement, at least between the House and the Senate in some of these areas. And we're still working with Senator Tim Scott out of the House to be able to find a piece of legislation that we can all move at the federal level while people work at the local level. Looking to end chokeholds, requiring body cams, requiring reforms so that there's responses to excessive force and protecting civil rights. But in the end, look, defunding the police is not going to be the answer here. It's why I've consistently supported funding for COPS grants, which put more police on the street, but also provide more funding for community policing, just like the Burn Justice grants.
Time, sir.
And I think we all have to come together to be able to take these issues head on instead of politicizing them.
Bob Walsh, same question. What role do police, the DA, criminal justice reform? How can we get past this problem?
Well, first of all, this is absolutely a local issue. It's not a matter for Congress. One of the problems we have is that we have excess law enforcement because we have excess laws. We have laws that criminalize normal activity in minority cultures. It's a danger of having majority rule that the majority becomes tyrannical. We have several things that we must do. In Santa Fe, here we have a commission that's going to start looking at reforming local policing. But local policing here isn't bad. Some of the things we should change is it shouldn't be possible to do an arrest without a warrant unless there's an immediate threat to life or injury. And any kind of warrant, whether a search warrant or an arrest warrant, should provide an opportunity to argue that the grounds are not sufficient. If the object of the warrant is not available, then a public defender should be taking care of that case.
Mr. Ronchetti, again, same question. Is defunding the police and moving resources around to different areas the answer to you to solve this problem as I laid it out?
No, that's a horrendous idea, and I think what you see is here in New Mexico we don't have enough police officers. We don't have the ability to cover what we need across this state, and even when you talk about qualified immunity, Gene, that's something that my opponent has supported, and that would allow police to be sued by someone who just doesn't like the way they were arrested in a frivolous lawsuit. That will destroy police departments too. Look, this is not a systematically racist country. I don't believe that. Is there racism? Yes, there is, and it needs to be addressed. And these imbalances have to be addressed in a big way in our minority communities. I think they can be addressed through better education and through safer streets. The communities that need the police officers doing their job well are our minority communities as well as our other communities too. So these can all be done well, and it can be done. And I appreciate the congressman saying he's still working with Tim Scott, but you could have fooled me because the deal they had in the Senate died in the Senate. In fact, Kamala Harris helped it die. Congressman, you and Nancy Pelosi helped it die. It could have been done. You mentioned some of those great things. We could have had 75% of what we were looking for in a police reform bill. But again, it's D.C. politics that you choose over New Mexico. We could have solved this, or at least addressed it.
Representative, do you have a response?
Look, Mr. Ronchetti, the Congressional Black Caucus is working with Senator Tim Scott to try to find some common ground here. And I appreciate you pointing out that Tim Scott's bill was in the U.S. Senate. I'm in the U.S. House. Article 1 of the Constitution, they actually created the legislative branch. There's a House and there's a Senate. I'm going to continue working in the House to make progress. And in the U.S. Senate, which I'm asking the people to entrust me to be your voice, in the same way we've been able to make progress in the U.S. House, I promise you I will continue to work every day and put you first to try to do my due diligence to make a positive difference in the United States Senate.
Congressman, honestly, there's no reason to be condescending. You know this as well as anybody, that there needs to be work done on both sides, both the House and the Senate, to get a bill through. And now would be a good time to ask you then, because you're doing the civics lesson, will you guarantee now that you will not vote to get rid of the filibuster? And I'll explain that. That means you need 60 votes to get a bill out of the Senate, meaning you need bipartisan support in most cases to get something out of the Senate. Will you agree now that you won't support that as long as we're in the civics portion of this?
Representative?
Are we able to ask each other questions, Gene? Because I have a few good ones for Mark.
How about if you do just this one?
Ask each other questions. I'll answer his question, but I have one for him as well.
Okay.
That's okay, Gene.
Go ahead.
So look, Mark, as you continue to see what Mitch McConnell is doing, he's continued to tear apart the precedents and the traditions of the United States Senate to put his own conservative agenda forward. And a conservative agenda that, by the way, you support. You've gone on the record and you said that this Supreme Court nominee needs to be rushed through. Mitch McConnell is wasting time doing this as opposed to passing COVID relief and having meaningful relief. So Mitch McConnell's actions are, as everyone has been saying across America, that everything's on the table.
Time, sir.
Good constituents.
Got to go to closing statements, guys. Appreciate that back and forth there. We're almost out of time. But before we go, we want to give each of the candidates one more chance to address the voters directly. You each have 1 minute for a closing statement, and we'll begin with Bob Walsh.
Our declaration tells us with great beauty, when government destroys, it is our duty to throw it off, abolish or amend. My party advocates a healing trend. So rise and heed our declaration's tenet. Vote Libertarian. Vote Walsh for Senate. You've patiently endured my rants and rhyme, and now I yield the balance of my time.
You don't have to yield. You have the right to take up all your time if you got another thing to say. You're well under a minute.
I'll float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Appropriate your culture? That's for me.
There you go. Next up for closing statements, Representative Ben Ray Lujan. 1 minute.
Gene, thank you so much for tonight. I know this is a tough role and responsibility, but you do it well on a weekly basis. To everyone that tuned in tonight, I think you can see the clear difference between myself and my opponent, Mr. Ronchetti. Look, I'm proud to be born and raised in New Mexico. I went to Head Start down the street from where I live, graduated from a local high school in New Mexico Highlands University. It's been an honor to serve as your U.S. representative, to make a positive difference in advancing issues like educating members across America what acequias and land grants are and working to make them stronger. We have a big responsibility in front of us with COVID relief. We have to come together and look after our loved ones. It's such an honor to serve you in the U.S. House. I hope I can earn your vote for the U.S. Senate. May God keep you safe. Please keep me in your prayers. Please get out and vote. Wear your mask, practice social distancing, and look after our loved ones. Thanks for tuning in.
Appreciate that, Representative. Finally, we hear one more time from Mark Ronchetti. 1 minute, speak directly to the voters.
I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate both Mr. Walsh and Congressman Lujan sitting down. I know we go back and forth, but the fact of the matter is no matter where you fall on this, you have people out here, and I think people across the state who love New Mexico and who want the best for New Mexico. And I think for all of us who live in this state, we see where we are, and we see so much potential. We see so much opportunity to rise up from where we are right now. We can have a better education system. We can have safer streets. We can absolutely have better economic opportunity. But you deserve a senator who is going to level with you. You deserve a senator who's going to be the same person in New Mexico as he is in Washington, D.C. I will always be that person for you. I will shoot straight with you, and if we disagree, we can disagree, but we'll do it knowing we both want what's best for New Mexico. I would appreciate your vote, and thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Ronchetti. We thank you for watching this Election 2020 special, a debate with the U.S. Senate candidates. We thank you for watching and for staying engaged and informed. Thanks also to our partners with the Citizens Agenda that's helped inform us on the important issues to cover in this debate. The New Mexico Black Voters Collaborative, we thank you. And New Mexico Native Vote, we thank you too. You can find more of our election coverage on our election page at nmpbs.org. We encourage you to vote and to be as safe as possible while you're making your voice heard at the polls.